Hello and welcome to the Onstage Colorado podcast. I'm Alex Miller and I'm here once again with arts reporter Tony Tresca. Hey, Tony, how's it going?
Going good. Good to see you again, Alex, after we spent the evening together at local theater companies last night. So two times in 1 week. This is a treat.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about last night here in just a minute. So today's, it's September 24th as we record this. So we will run down some of the latest shows that we've seen and or reviewed on the website, as well as take a look at what's coming up around Colorado as we head into the busy season that starts with a lot of Halloween themed shows and then into all kinds of holiday season shows, of course, and then alongside all the non-holiday or seasonal shows that are all mixed in there. So lots to talk about and see out there. Also, later in the pod, my interview with playwright Topher Payne, whose new show, You Enjoy Myself, had its world premiere last night in Boulder with local theater company. And joining in on the conversation is Betty Hart, the director of the show and also co-artistic director at Local. So let's start there, Tony, since we were both at it, You Enjoy Myself premiere last night. And what a fun night at the theater it was. It was like a galaxy of stars in the audience. I mean, it was a packed house, a really rowdy, very, very kind, loving audience there for, the playwright was there, of course. And
it was a very nice mix of, as you were saying, packed house of like theater folks. So like a lot of local theater folks, obviously. And I mean that both in the pun not necessarily intended there, but I'll take
local
it.
And local.
A lot of local theater folks out in the crowd, but also lots of like a little bit, I would say, non-traditional theater fans. Let's call them fish fans, as they do in the show.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was fish heads, and they were. So neither one of us will go ahead and admit it. We're not fish heads. We're not. I'm not super versed in the jam band culture myself at all. So there were a lot of jokes that we kind of, or lyrics or references that maybe went over our heads, but we could sense them because we felt pockets of the crowd were just reacting to them in a way that we were like, and you just.
Right. And we're mentioning that because the band Fish is kind of a central theme to this script of You Enjoy Myself.
Yeah. It's about all these six people who are they come together on this Vermont farmhouse via like an Instagram post, and they all kind of bond over their relationships. They're all in various points, and this kind of shared connection of fish that they all share.
Right. And, so you'll hear in the podcast interview that I did with Topher later, a little bit about how he came to it. But what I saw last night was this is a guy who's got 20 plays under his belt. I thought it showed like somebody really hitting their stride. And of course, as a playwright and just this cleverness that he used to put together this kind of big puzzle and then have it kind of, you're not sure what's going on at first. You're like, why are we listening to this character who's alone in this house as a narrator? Kind of, she didn't really seem to have a purpose there, and that was Eden Lane's character, and then it all comes together very, very satisfactorily at the end, and really well done.
Yeah, Act One ends in this delicious kind of scene in which all six characters kind of arrive and realize that they maybe know each other in other contexts, but we're certainly not expecting to see each other at this farmhouse on this day all together.
Yes. And a couple of particularly embarrassing sort of revelations along the way, in addition with some really heavy-duty family dynamics and stuff like that. So
heavy-duty family dynamics and heavy-duty relationship stuff too, particularly as the play runs into the second act. It gets pretty emotional in there.
Yeah,
laughs as well as some tears in the crowd.
Yep. Yeah. So super fun show, but also quite a nice piece of a literary work as well. It's not just like a ha-ha comedy.
It's very sharp and poignant. There are lines in there, particularly a line that Ileana's character Isabel says in the second act that I'm going to be thinking about for a long time. So definitely check you have some time to check this one out. It's going to be playing at the Derry Arts Center through October 14th. So head on over to the Derry in Boulder and check this one out.
Yeah. There were a lot of great lines in it that sometimes make me wish I took notes during plays, and I can't do that. It's just like I'm trying to focus on writing notes in the dark, and I can't. I miss some of the action on stage, and I wish that I wish the script was available for all these shows so I could show some of these. Was it one of the? I think it was Lauren Gunderson. I follow her on Facebook, and she mentioned. In Britain, one of her plays was opening, and it's common there for the theater to provide scripts for sale of the play, which I was like, that's a great idea. Those would totally sell, and theaters could always use more revenue. So theaters, get those scripts, make them available, and charge double.
I would certainly enjoy myself a copy of this script. I would love to reread it. I think, it's like. Your analogy of a puzzle is super fitting for this play, because I just would love to go back and see all the little puzzle pieces as Betty's setting up earlier on, because it hits you how these characters all know each other in the big reveals, but he's been only because he's been planting the seeds so brilliantly.
Yeah, and a big shout out to Betty Hart, who directed it, for working very closely with the playwright on this one since it was part of their play festival in 22, I think, and really did a great job of staging it.
And truly a new work in every sense of it. I was chatting with the creative team after the words, and there was a new ending on this play as of Wednesday. They were talking in rehearsal. Something just wasn't quite working. And so in the true new spirit sense, they kind of all just Topher went back to the drawing room and came back with that final scene. And it just feels, that's the power of new work. It feels like it couldn't have been any other way, but apparently there were it took so many drafts to get there. And that's so cool to be able to witness.
It's the wonderful thing about plays versus, say a novel or something that's like, once it's published, it's cooked. Plays are a collaborative process where the script is just a part of it, a big part, of course, but there's a lot more that goes into new play development than just saying, here's the script, do it. So we'll get to some of the other shows that we've reviewed recently, or that we've seen. But we had something so this was following up from a conversation we had offline last week. I was having breakfast with Mark Reagan from Butterfly Effect Theater Company, and he was growing a beard, and I was like, wow, Mark, I've never seen you with a beard before. And he said, well, I'm understudying Chris Kendall's character in their upcoming production of Cold Country. And I said, oh, and so he was telling me, he said, COVID is starting to come back, it only takes one actor, one member of the cast to get COVID to deep six your production and potentially lose tens of thousands of dollars in ticket revenue and maybe kill it altogether, depending. And so he's like, theaters, if they're not doing understudies, boy, they really should think twice about it. So, and you came across this just recently at a show too, right?
Yeah, I was over at Vintage on Friday, September 22nd, to see their production of Cabaret, and we're seated, and all of a sudden I see Bernie, Cardell, and Jennifer, who is the stage manager, kind of rush backstage before the show's starting.
Yeah, Bernie's the artistic director.
He's the artistic director and the director of Cabaret. And then Bernie comes out and he makes a speech to the audience. And he lets us know that that Abby, who was originally supposed to play Sally Bowles, who is the lead in Cabaret, one of the leads over there, she was not feeling well. She had been there, or something had happened. She had been wanting to show up and do it, but about 15 minutes before go, she had to call out. And so they put in her understudy, Ainsley Upton, 15 minutes before the show started. She had only ever rehearsed Act 2 before. So this was her first crack at Act 1. She had gotten to kind of work through Act 2 and a little bit in rehearsals, and had obviously been taking notes in anticipation of this happening. And she had a scheduled performance that Ainsley was supposed to do down the line, but it was not supposed to be on the 22nd. But thank God that Vintage had an understudy who was able to go on. Otherwise, like you're saying, that would have been a sunk cost. That show would have had to go, or would have had to move people around. And it was like one of those things we were talking about earlier, where it's one of those. This is one of those theater magic things. It's the thing that separates theater, I think, a little bit from a novel or certainly film. Is you get something like this. Ainsley Upton came out there and delivered an incredible performance as Sally. It was really remarkable to watch. It was super raw. She was having a lot of fun interacting with the audience, and it was super cool to be able to witness. But also, I guess to kind of relate to the other point, also very scary to have to having these considerations because of larger things that are going on like COVID. It is definitely coming back.
Yeah, it's I've never understudied a part. I know it's in some ways a thankless job. You may never get to do it, but when you're called, when you're needed, boy, you're a game saver. So I was in a show. I was in a production of Rumors once where one of the characters did not show up. She did not show up for the performance, and one of the women who played a smaller character later in the play, she says, "I think I can do it." And since we had about 20 minutes before that character would appear in the first act, and so we were still maybe hoping for the actress would show up. But Beth, who was ready to step in, we didn't know who was going to step on stage until it was Beth, and she nailed it. She knew all the lines somehow, or ad-libbed them well enough, and But that was sort of terrifying. Which is one of the great things about theater. It can be terrifying. It keeps you on your toes.
It's a high wire act. I don't know. It's that the spontaneity is one of the things that definitely just always attracted me to the art form and keeps me coming back.
Yeah. It's like sometimes you think about you're competing with whatever Top Gun with all the CGI and explosions and other movies like that and TV shows and all that. But there's something special about live theater where that risk is always present. And it hangs over the whole thing, usually in a good way, but sometimes it's like, whoa. So anyway, well, we don't know. I haven't seen any numbers recently on what COVID cases are like in Colorado. Hopefully people are going to be getting their vaccines, although those numbers are not looking good, especially for certain people of certain persuasion. We may start thinking about wearing masks again as we get into the later in the fall and winter if these things pick up. And I've already seen some people wearing masks in the theater. Anyway, well, think about that and shout out to anybody who's ever understudied and is understudying right now. So onto shows. All right. So on to some more shows. As we've noted, September has really heated up with a ton of new shows out there. So in addition to Enjoy Myself, you just saw that show that we talked about recently, the Everything I Ever Knew I Learned as a Zombie or something like that, Arts in the Open. It's Chautauqua in Boulder. How was that?
It was fun. It's a fun zombie show. Lots of puns on the trail. About a 1.5 mile hike in the Chautauqua Park. It was a fun It's a pretty small cast of just about 5 actors, assisted by artistic director Matt Davis, who's also stage managing, and so that just means he's running around with backpacks behind the scenes, making sure everybody gets to the location. The crowd who I was with really had a good time, and it's a great place to experience theater, and it was nice to just kind of get outdoors as well.
Okay, great. Is that, even with the zombie theme, is it appropriate for kids?
I would definitely say it is appropriate for kids. They kind of they start with a kind of spooky zombie ambiance, but it kind of quickly gets into a bit of more of a jokey punny tone. Zombies in the show are kind of people. They're making a lot of jokes about zombieism, people getting zombies, how people becoming a zombie, how it might kind of react and affect social situations with parents and whatnot. So what might parents do if their kid was suddenly a zombie, and stuff like that. So I would definitely say it would be appropriate for kids, probably around 8 and up or so. Although I don't have any kids, so I can't make that call.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's like, originally, I mean, zombies was a gross, gory, disgusting, violent, nasty, type of horror. And the fact that the way that it can be sanitized, like my granddaughters were watching the show called The Descendants, which is like all about zombies. And I was like, obviously they're not showing them eating the intestines out of a dead, still live person, like in a good zombie flick. But it's pretty funny the way that's changed. And, to some extent, vampires and all that too has been sanitized somewhat. But anyway, another show that you were going to see that I'm really curious to hear about, Bulls with the Bard. This is the Get Stoned and Watch Shakespeare show. Did you see that?
I did see it. I was there on Thursday night. So for, it's really nice to be able to say this to a sold out crowd. We've been able to say that a couple of times on this podcast already. So I was there opening night. Very, very rowdy crowd. They had a lot of not drinking games, excuse me. They had smoking games that you could scan on the way in. They had it was character names that you would take a hit on, like anytime like magic is used, whenever they would smoke. And that room was smoky, Alex. I mean, I ended up, I had to drive, so I did not actually end up smoking in the facility myself while I was there, because I was like, you know what, I'm going to value everybody, my safety and the safety of folks on the road.
Very responsible of you.
I knew because I was going to have to come on here and talk about it. I didn't want to have to admit to reckless driving or anything, and so I didn't. But that's secondhand smoke in the room created quite an atmosphere for the production. And, I'd love to see this done again, because I think that it was such a fun concept. The actors were having a lot of fun with it. I would love to maybe see it in a slightly different space. I don't know if that's entirely possible, because it did get it was very small. And so it did get a little bit loud in there. Maybe could have just brought the volume down a little bit with the cast as well.
And the show was Midsummer's, right?
It was Midsummer. So it's a big, rowdy, loud kind of show by nature. But when it's in a really small space like that, there's not a lot of room and it's super smoky. It's a little bit a lot. So I'd love to maybe experiment. I see them do it in a slightly different setting or something, but definitely see it done again, because it was a lot of fun.
So the cast was also high. How did you perceive their performance? Did they remember all their lines?
No. So no, I don't know how to. I don't know how to comment on it. It was it was more kind of akin to, I guess, traditional Shakespeare and I mean that in the literal, like, when he was writing it, and that they had someone in the back who had a book on hand. And so anytime like people would start to forget their lines or something, this prompter in the back would shout out a line to cue people on stage. So, and there were quite a few moments in which actors would, they'd blank. Right. They'd just like, they're stoned. Like they're consuming an ungodly amount of marijuana in front of us on stage. So there's no question about the authenticity for sure. And so a couple times, but it definitely just added to the fun, because anytime the actors would like kind of blank or something, the audience lost their shit. Oh, really? Yeah. They were super hooping and hollering. Yeah. The prompter would give them their line, and kudos to these actors. They would the prompter would give them like a word or something, and they're right back into it. It was a lot of coordination for being as high as they were.
Wow, that's amazing. Because of course, yes, it's a huge taboo to go on stage drunk or stoned or in any other way incapacitated, except of course if it's a given, it's part of the thing. And that sounds like it was an awful lot of fun. So that one is probably, if not sold out completely, is going to be probably tough to get into, but I would imagine the success will have them staging it again before too long.
Yeah, it was a really limited run. I think they closed if it wasn't last night, they're done as of today. So but it was a cool experience, and if you want to see it, and you should definitely let them know.
All right. Well, a couple of other recent reviews on our site: Million Dollar Quartet, which is a musical about Elvis, and Jerry Lee Lewis, and Carl Perkins, and Johnny Cash getting together one night up at candlelight. So our reviewer, Kara Redmond, really enjoyed that. And that's running, I think, for another month or so. Cabaret, you saw that, and we have a review from our reviewer Eric Fitzgerald. We talked about that some last week. You thought it was a great production, so up at Vintage if you want to check that out. And then we have a review of Urinetown from Eric, which we also talked about some last week. Also a really cool, great production going on at the Arts Hub in Lafayette. Coming up, well, before we talk about coming up reviews, any other shows that we haven't mentioned that you've seen that you want to mention?
No, those we are all caught up.
All right. So coming up, we'll have reviews for The Curious Savage at the Theater Company of Lafayette, Blues in the Night at Aurora Fox, All Shook Up, another harken back to the Elvis years at Town Hall. Coming up, White People from Empathy Jam, and then the Laramie Project at the Arvada Center. All reviews that were coming up. And a couple of other things to mention that are opening. Steel Magnolias is at the Ent Center in Colorado Springs. That's the University of Colorado Springs troupe that usually does a great job. And Steel Magnolias is just one of those shows that just keeps coming around, but it's such a great show that no one minds. Another completely different kind of show, Murder in the Haunted Royal Court Dinner Show at Adams Mystery Playhouse, which is a ton of fun to go to. It's like a dinner theater kind of thing. A couple of one-night stands. Cypherbird is doing a show called Conundrums, avant-garde variety show at Junkyard Social in Boulder on September 30th. Modus Theater is doing one that same night called Playback Improv at Louisville Center for the Arts. Down in Cripple Creek, this is a great time to go down there, as probably leaves are turning pretty well there in the mountains outside Colorado Springs. They're doing The Play That Goes Wrong, the Butte Theater, from 9/29 through October 26th, and that's it's just a fun show. It's just, you just want to laugh.
I've never seen it staged.
Oh, really? Do you know that they did a series on the original company that did that also has a series of TV programs you can watch that are really fun.
And I have seen the TV programs. I've just never, and I've seen they've got the recorded Peter Pan that goes wrong. There's a film version of that floating around. They just did that. If it's not on Broadway currently, it was just on Broadway recently, and that one's a ton of fun. So good chance I guess to see it out in Cripple Creek.
So as we get into spooky season, we've got the Cemetery Club from Windsor Community Playhouse from September 29th to October 15th, and Dracula at Firehouse Theater, which is at John Hand Theater in Denver from September 30th through October 21st. I'd like to try and get out to see that one. That looks really interesting. And then there's the show that you actually do know about. I think you just interviewed the folks about that, Pastisserie at the Savoy Theater in Denver from Theater Artibus, will be from September 28th through October 12th. Can you tell us about that? Am I pronouncing it right? Pastisserie?
That is correct. Yeah, they said in our interview, emphasis on the pastisserie.
Okay.
But you are saying it correct. It's kind of a Willy Wonka-esque trip into a chocolate factory, but instead of chocolate, this factory makes nostalgia. And so it's kind of this interesting meditation on the original meaning of the word nostalgia, which doesn't have such a positive connotation. It was actually a term for soldiers who were so nostalgic for home that they were deemed incapable of being able to function. They were so lost in this trance of an imagined state. And so it's kind of this play about how nostalgia has become mass-produced for us, in a sense, but it doesn't necessarily have such a positive. That's not necessarily such a positive thing. So it should be a fun kind of immersive thing. It's going to be set up in the Savoy, their space over there, which is always fun, and kind of like a bit of I think they said like an alley kind of style seating with audience on either side of the action.
All right. Well, I'm going to be at that one, I think on the 29th, so we'll have a review of that Looking forward to that. If you haven't had a chance to see Into the Woods yet, Ovation West is in Evergreen is doing that show, and that's up through October 8th. And then way down south at Fort Lewis College in Durango, they're doing Eurydice, which is an update of some sort on the classic Greek tragedy of Orpheus and Eurydice. And that runs from September 29th through October 7th. And then one other thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to put on my script here is I just had an email from the folks over at Betsy about a new series that they're doing called the Kingpenny Golden Radio Show. So it's a live 1930s, 40s style improvised show with a great cast, and it's going to be the second Wednesdays of the month at the Savoy in Denver. I think they're also doing some performances at Buntport, and that's running like I think starting in October and then all the way through May. And I'm sure they'll keep it going if it's successful. So that's something to check out if you want to know about it. Just go on the Betsy website. And I think that's all we've got for now. There's plenty of stuff going on out there in addition to theater. You can go out and peep at the leaves by day, and at night, go check out some great theater that's going on all around the state. So, thanks, Tony, for coming on. Appreciate always having you on and talk about stuff.
Yeah, it was a treat
about theater.
A treat getting to come on and chat with you, Alex.
All right. Well, thanks again. And coming up, my interview with Topher Payne and Betty Hart. So stick around. Can get going. So yeah, I'm here with playwright Topher Payne and Betty Hart, artistic director at local theater company, also the director of Topher's play You Enjoy Myself, which is going to be opening here pretty soon, this coming weekend, right? So the 21st?
Saturday.
Okay, so the 23rd of September. So that's awesome. And, Betty, when you were on the podcast a little earlier this year, we talked about this play, and I was definitely intrigued by so the early news that I heard about it. So I know it's got a heavy fish component, and that's fish with a PH, and jam band and that whole culture. And this is this a premiere?
It is a world premiere.
Okay. And so just first, Topher, You Enjoy Myself. I love that title. And I was looking at your website, and you have a lot of great titles for all of your plays. So yeah, they're all like the kind of ones that catch your eye. I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. So can I just ask where the inspiration came for this show?
The inspiration came from my first husband, Tommy, who is a follower of fish. We met when we were in our mid-20s, and I was a theater baby, and he was a jam band baby. And we found a lot of crossover in those communities. Both of us had sort of a tribe of like-minded individuals. For me, it was storytellers, and for him, it was people that connected with this band that I'd vaguely heard of. Right. But I didn't really know anything about jam band culture. And so I was introduced to it through the community of people that would camp out in our backyard whenever Fish played Atlanta.
And they were in your backyard why were they in your backyard and not the show?
It's funny, Alex. I recall asking that question a lot myself. Within the culture of jam bands, and for the uninitiated, it may be more familiar for those that followed the Grateful Dead and the Deadheads that would just go from town to town following the band on tour. And wherever you wind up, there is an expectation of hospitality within the community that extends also to their spouses and extended family. And the notion being that wherever you go, you'll never meet a stranger. And you have a community that's ready to embrace you and receive you exactly as you are. And you kind of connect in this shared love of something that brings you all together. And I found that compelling. There are the people that follow like follow like they're going to a pilgrimage from location to location to location. You have other people that'll join up for a week of the tour, and then you have the ones that'll only join up when the show comes to their town or within a certain radius. But it is a family, and there are the obligations and responsibilities and frustrations that you find within any other family unit.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it definitely, I was a Deadhead early on, back when Jerry was still alive. And so I saw quite a number of shows, and I understand that whole community, the culture. I never toured. I always kind of waited till they came to me, because I lived in New York and Colorado, and the Dead always played quite a bit in both of those states. So.
Yeah, they would always find you.
Yeah, they came to me. And then Betty, this was, you were part of the selection committee that chose this. What was it about the Topher's play that appealed to you?
Well, I think it's important to note that the play came through our selection process, which is completely de-identified. So though I knew Topher and I reached out to him to get him to submit a play, once it was submitted, it really went through the entire process. And I didn't really know how it did until it turned up in the finalists, which was very exciting. Okay. So what spoke to all three of the co-artistic directors is that it's a play about love. It's a play about music. It's a play about community. And it's a play about finding yourself and losing yourself. And all of the plays that we selected this season had that same theme. And we just love it. It's funny and it's smart and it's sexy. What's not to love?
All right. Funny, smart, and sexy. Yeah, you can't go wrong there. So Topher, I don't want to say like, what's it about? But like, what's the basic framework of the story with this fish, component on the edges?
Well, we take the shared love of fish as a common language among the characters in the play. And so you can come to this show without ever having heard a fish song or ever been to a fish show. And I promise you won't feel lost. And then if you have heard a fish song or been to a fish show, then we have lots of Easter eggs that were made just for you. But within that, I wanted to explore relationships at different stages. There's a couple that's just at the beginning of something. There's a couple that's clearly reaching the ending of something. And then a couple that is reunited after many years apart, trying to figure out who they are to each other now, or who they could be. And for all of them, there's this impulse toward devotion that we feel in sexual attraction, in romantic love, in my experience with marriage, that there is the dance of that which is familiar and that which is unexpected. And we anticipate that. It's what makes us a fan of anything. Our favorite author, our favorite musician, our favorite person. It's the mix of knowing what's coming and having absolutely no idea what's coming. And that anticipation is the hook. And I wanted to tell a story that celebrated our experience of music and the connection a character says in the show. You speak of music as you speak of love. Well, there's absolutely no difference. And I wanted to celebrate that.
All right. I have to ask, Topher, are you a fish head? Are you into the band?
I am not.
That's okay.
Which was a really interesting connecting tie between Betty and myself. Betty was coming in cold. I don't think you had ever heard a fish song in your life.
Never.
And for myself, I was introduced to it by someone who loves it very much, which is a great way to be introduced to anything.
Yeah.
With exploring their music, I started with the white tapes from the early 1980s when they were still college students, just putting the band together. And I started at the beginning and worked my way forward for about 40 years of music. And I got to experience the evolution of the band and their growth and changes as musicians. And the band has, of course, broken up and gotten back together and broken up again and gotten back together. And then there was COVID and then they got back together. And each time they evolved, they changed. What they wanted to communicate to an audience changed. As a playwright, I can totally relate to that. Did it make me love jam bands anymore? No, I can't say that it did. but I do have some favorite Phish songs now.
Okay. I'm sure you must have been to a show or two. And I bet, Betty, you went to one recently. Is that
I did.
Right?
They were here. And the day before Labor Day, I got to see my first Phish show, thanks to Scott Levy, who said, "Hey, I heard you're directing a show about Phish. Come, I'll happily bring you to your first Phish show." And so I did.
As she's texting me updates from the walk.
I did. I mean, I was texting the whole time. I was like, oh my gosh. It was a really wild ride, especially for someone who's never experienced it. And what I appreciated and I was able to bring back to the cast and to the design team is that this idea of community is something that really is universal. It's expressed perhaps in a different way than you would think, but this idea of caring for one another, having this passion and love for life and for each other simply because of your presence was pretty powerful. So I got a lot out of going to my first Phish show, and there is a lot of really strong music artistry. There's no question.
But you're not ready to follow them on tour quite yet.
I'm not going to follow anybody on tour, Alex, so it's not personal. There's no one I'm going to follow. No.
Yeah, I've never done. I would never do that either. I don't think I can imagine. There's a lot of bands I really love, but man, if I see them when they come around every year or three, that's good. So anyway, well, you also, when I saw the cast list for this show, I was like one of those ones where I was like, oh, wow, holy crap, what a cast. Yeah. So Topher, how has it been to watch this cast put this thing together in front of you?
Absolutely extraordinary, because there's very little watching involved. It is an intensely collaborative process that has engaged every single person in the room. The actors, Betty and myself, our assistant director, our stage manager, our assistant stage manager. It is a very collective experience. This show has gone through a tremendous number of rewrites in process because the actors have, as they always do in a world premiere, let me get to know the characters better. Before I get in the room with my world premiere cast, these are people that only exist in my head.
Right.
And the goal in the rehearsal process is by the end, these are people who live and breathe and feel. And there's always information that surprises me once I actually see that character living and breathing. And that's the charitable way of saying there's always the things that I got completely wrong, and the delight and frustration of navigating. Now that we know her better, what does this mean?
Right. Now, I know from talking to other playwrights that different playwrights have a different idea about what their role should be during the rehearsal process. Some of them are very, whoa, just hands off, and some more involved. And then, with the director, how did you two work together with the cast? Were you pretty much, are you still rewriting it right now? Still tweaking?
We are at a stage that we call the show is locked, meaning our primary concentration in the final week leading up to welcoming an audience into the space is giving the design team and the actors the opportunity to focus on their production of the show. That doesn't mean that the play won't continue to evolve, and there may be minor changes here and there. I made a small adjustment to one line last night, and the excitement for me at this stage of the process is I'm not locked down to my computer. I'm not, hunkering down for 2 days on rewrites. I'm here to support the production and to help them do whatever they can to realize their vision of the work.
Yeah. And as for how do we do the things we do, one, this isn't our first time working together. We've been director playwright before. We've been actor director too. Yeah. This is like our third iteration. Oh, cool. So we have real clear understanding that my job is to help tell the story that he wrote and to ask him questions to help his story be as strong and as vibrant and as wonderful as it can be. I have no desire to write or rewrite his play. He's not trying to direct the play. So we have our respective lanes, but we also have tremendous communication and collaboration because though we have set jobs, I guess, everything intersects. And so a moment that I'm helping to create allows him to say, oh, I could sharpen that with text and vice versa. So we work as a team. It's really about all of us are here to serve the play, and the play continues to grow. It's a thing unto itself that neither Topher or I control whatsoever. It's a thing, and our job is to help nurture it and watch it grow and then allow it to live and breathe. That's really the goal.
Send our baby off into the world.
Yeah, someday it'll be at college.
It's a thing, and that thing is having its world premiere this Saturday, September 23rd at the Dairy Center in Boulder. And so I'm really looking forward to it. I'll be there opening night on Saturday. Hope to meet you there, Topher. And I appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. I know you're busy. And Betty, I was just thinking, you I think hold a record now as a person who's been on this podcast more than anybody. I think this is maybe your third time. So congratulations, you get a pie or something.
That makes sense.
Thank you, Alex.
That's a good choice, Alex. I support that choice.
Oh yeah, we love talking to Betty. So again, thanks so much for being on. And I look forward to seeing you in the show. And any last thoughts that you want to part with, or?
Yeah, I would just say that we talked about the cast being phenomenal, and we didn't get a chance to mention the designers. The designers are incredible as well. So just really excited to tell this story with so many incredible people. And that includes our extraordinary SM team. It's the great group of people telling a really beautiful story together with love.
All right. Well, thanks again, playwright Topher Payne and Betty Hart, director of the show You Enjoy Myself, and also artistic director at a local theater company in Boulder. We will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Alex.
All right, that's it for this episode of the Onstage Colorado podcast. Thanks so much for listening. And if you enjoy these conversations about Colorado theater, please share our podcast with any theater-loving friends you may know. We'd love to get more listeners on here, and word of mouth is a great way to reach more folks. Next week on the podcast, we'll have an interview Tony Trescott did with a few members of Theater Artibus who'll be talking about their pastisserie show coming up. So be sure to come back for that one, as well as our usual rundown of shows around the state. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Onstage Colorado podcast, wherever you get your audio stuff, and check out all the reviews, news, podcasts, and our full statewide theater calendar on the website at onstagecolorado.com. I'm Alex Miller, and we'll see you at the show.